So you just dropped a ton of cash on a new PC. It's got a beast of a processor, plenty of RAM, a blazing fast SSD. You fire up the latest big name game, slide all the settings to Ultra, and it's a disaster. A stuttering, choppy mess. Or maybe you're a creator. You just imported some 4K footage, and the second you try to skim through the timeline, your entire computer just gives up. So what's actually going on here? How can a brand new machine feel so sluggish? While a few things can cause these slowdowns, a very common culprit is one of the most powerful yet misunderstood parts of your PC, the graphics processor. It's the engine that powers what you see on screen, and the line between a PC that just gets by and a PC that truly flies is often drawn right here. Today, we're breaking down the physical difference between integrated and dedicated GPUs. We'll look at how they use memory, how they use power, and by the end, you'll get why for any tough job, a dedicated GPU isn't just a nice to have, it's a game changer. Alright, let's start with the basics. What even is a GPU? A GPU, or graphics processing unit, is a special chip that's a master at one thing, creating the images you see on your screen and doing it incredibly fast. Here's a simple way to think about it. Your computer's CPU, the central processing unit, is like a brilliant, highly paid surgeon. It's a generalist, amazing at tackling a few very complex tasks one after another. It runs your operating system, it runs your apps, and it's the brain of the whole operation. If the CPU is the surgeon, the GPU is a massive crew of construction workers. Thousands of them, all lined up. They aren't great at complex step-by-step thinking, but if you give them a huge repetitive job that can be split into thousands of tiny parts, like painting all the individual pixels in a single frame of a game, they can get it done almost instantly. This is called parallel processing, and it's what GPUs were born to do. But this workforce comes in two flavors, and this is where things get interesting: integrated and dedicated graphics. They do the same basic job, but how and where they do it changes everything. First up, we have the most common graphics processor in the world, the integrated GPU, or iGPU. Just like the name says, an iGPU is built right into the same chip package as the CPU, sometimes on the very same piece of silicon and sometimes on its own tile sitting right next door. Either way, the brain and the graphics core ship as one part, which has some huge benefits. Because it's all one chip, it's incredibly efficient with space and power. This is why you find iGPUs in almost every thin laptop, budget PC, and office machine. They produce less heat, so they don't need giant whirring fans, and they barely sip power, which is a lifesaver for battery life. For everyday stuff like browsing the web, watching Netflix, and writing emails, an iGPU is plenty. In fact, modern integrated graphics from Intel and AMD have gotten pretty darn capable and can even handle some light gaming or casual video editing. But that efficiency comes with a major trade-off: performance. The biggest problem for an integrated GPU is that it has to share everything with the CPU. It doesn't have its own private pool of memory. It carves out a slice of your main system RAM. It doesn't get its own power line. It shares the limited power budget of the whole CPU chip. Let's go back to our analogy. An iGPU is like having the surgeon and the entire construction crew living and working in the same tiny studio apartment. They have to share one small kitchen, that's your system RAM. They also have to share one electrical outlet, that's the power budget. When the crew needs to do a big job like rendering a 3D model, they're constantly getting in the surgeon's way, who's also trying to use the kitchen. They're fighting over counter space and electricity. This creates a huge bottleneck, and it's why your system grinds to a halt under a heavy graphics load. Now, let's talk about the solution. The dedicated GPU, or DGPU. You might know it as a discrete graphics card. This is a completely separate component. It's a GPU on its own circuit board that slots right into your motherboard. It's built for one purpose, to be a performance monster, and it has all the resources it needs to do its job without compromise. A dedicated GPU doesn't have to share. It has its own private ultra-fast memory right there on the card called VRAM. It has its own connection to power, pulling what it needs directly from the power supply through heavy-duty cables. And it has its own cooling system, often with multiple fans and a big heat sink to deal with the intense heat it generates. In our analogy, this is like giving the construction crew their own custom-built industrial workshop. This workshop has a massive, fully stocked warehouse of materials right next to the assembly line. That's the VRAM. It's hooked up to its own substation from the power grid. That's the dedicated power draw. The surgeon can just send instructions over to the workshop and let the crew work at full blast, 24/7, without ever getting in each other's way. So there are no bottlenecks anywhere. This is why a dedicated GPU can deliver such a huge leap in performance. It's not just that the chip is faster, the entire system around it was built for pure raw power. Let's pause here for a second. We've got the shared apartment versus the dedicated workshop. If you're having an aha moment right now and you're finally understanding why your games are stuttering or your video exports take forever, do me a favor and hit that like button. We're all about making PC hardware easy to understand, so consider subscribing to see more. Now that we get the big picture, let's zoom in on the two things that really separate these two, memory and power. So let's start with memory. The difference between system RAM and VRAM is huge. System RAM is built for the CPU. It's optimized for low latency, meaning it's great at quickly grabbing small individual bits of data for the CPU. VRAM is built for the GPU and is optimized for high bandwidth. It's designed to move massive chunks of data all at once. Think of it this way. System RAM is like a librarian who can instantly find any single book you ask for. VRAM is like a system of giant conveyor belts that can move an entire section of the library at once. For graphics, where the GPU needs huge texture files and 3D models all at the same time, you need the conveyor belts, not just the fast librarian. So then there's the power side. An iGPU is on a strict diet. It's limited by the power and cooling of the CPU it's attached to, getting just a small fraction of the chip's total power budget. A dedicated GPU, on the other hand, is a beast. A mid-range card might pull close to 200 watts all by itself, and the big high-end cards can draw much, much more. Power is performance because the more electricity a chip can safely use, the more work it can do. This massive power draw is also why a DGPU needs its own giant cooling system. All that energy turns into heat that has to be moved away from the chip fast. Private high-bandwidth VRAM and a huge dedicated power budget are the two fundamental reasons a DGPU will smoke an iGPU in any demanding task. Okay, so let's circle back to that title, why every PC needs a dedicated GPU. Is that literally true? No, of course it isn't. If you just use your PC for email, web browsing, Netflix, and spreadsheets, a modern integrated GPU is the smart choice. It saves money, it runs quietly, and in a laptop, it gives you way better battery life. But the title is meant to make a point, because the moment your work or your play gets serious, that DGPU goes from a luxury to a necessity. Let's talk about who really needs one. So let's start with gamers. Yes, modern iGPUs can run some older games at 1080p on low settings. But if you want to play modern, visually stunning games at high resolutions like 1440p or 4K, crank up the eye candy. And especially if you want to use features like ray tracing, a dedicated GPU is pretty much non-negotiable. It's the most important part of a gaming PC, period. And next up, content creators. If you edit video, especially in 4K, a DGPU is a lifesaver. It slashes your export times from hours to minutes. More importantly, it makes your timeline buttery smooth, letting you scrub through complex projects with lots of effects without constant stuttering. The same goes for 3D artists and engineers. The power to move complex models around in real time or render a beautiful scene depends almost entirely on the parallel processing of a DGPU. And finally, a field that's exploding right now, AI and machine learning. Training AI models is an incredibly heavy job that's perfect for a GPU's architecture. For anyone serious about doing local AI development, a powerful DGPU isn't just helpful, it's the cornerstone of their workstation. So what's the takeaway here? We asked why a brand new PC can feel slow, and the answer often comes down to this split between integrated and dedicated graphics. An integrated GPU built right into the CPU is a master of efficiency. It's designed for a world of shared resources, and it's perfect for the everyday tasks that most people do. A dedicated GPU is a statement. It's a separate, specialized powerhouse with its own memory and its own power. Built for one thing, maximum performance. The choice isn't about one being better, it's about matching the right tool to the job. But if your work or play involves creating, rendering, or gaming in complex virtual worlds, then the answer is crystal clear. That stutter in your game, that lag in your timeline, that's the sound of your PC begging for the resources that only a dedicated GPU can provide. Giving your PC a proper graphics card is how you unlock its true potential.
Everything you just figured out rests on something deeper, and that's the next video, so start there. Would you rather understand your computer than just use it? Then subscribe, and I'll see you next time, further down the stack.